The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them.
Ida B. Wells Barnett, circa 1890.
The Great Migration of African Americans into Illinois following the Civil War and the increased segregation that accompanied it led to growing tensions between blacks and whites. Between 1891 and 1914, there were at least 22 racially motivated lynchings in Illinois. Moreover, between 1908 and 1919, 3 of the nation's most significant race riots occurred in Springfield, East St. Louis, and Chicago. William Donegan, an acquaintance of Abraham Lincoln, was a victim of the 1908 Springfield race riot. He came to Springfield in 1845 and worked as a cobbler. He often hid fugitive slaves and later helped numerous African Americans relocate to the north and find work. During the second day of the Springfield riot, a white mob dragged the elderly Donegan out of his house, slit his throat, and lynched him. Donegan died the next day. Ida B. Wells Barnett was a famous anti-lynching activist. Born a slave in 1862, she first spoke out against lynching when 3 acquaintances were killed in 1892. She then published a pamphlet entitled Southern Horrors: Lynch Laws in All Its Phases. In the mid-1890s, Wells Barnett moved to Chicago, where she founded the city's first African-American kindergarten and was a founding member of the NAACP.
Any other issues that are out there that you think might eventually be hammered out in a courtroom, or...
Ferguson.
Excuse me?
Ferguson.
Ferguson. So what should we talk about Ferguson?
How Michael Brown got killed.
That's right. And how we interact with the institutions that are around us in community life to provide protection, right? That's exactly right. And so oftentimes, issues that begin on a neighborhood street find their way into a courtroom as we try to sort out exactly what happened. And then, in turn, put in place the provisions or the laws, maybe opening up opportunities, maybe reducing some opportunities so that those same things don't happen again in Ferguson or any other community. But we've heard that story happen before, haven't we? So that's what makes it especially sad, isn't it?
It's happened over and over.
We don't like to repeat history.
And we don't want to repeat history.
Could possibly be something that's maybe started right in a place like this, you think? Laws and
Like
legislation and
legally?
rules and regulations that are put in place could very well be something that is beneficial, and it all starts in a place like this.
I still don't see any difference.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't see any difference though. Like, I mean, there's some laws and stuff out there that you're not supposed to do, but obviously people still do it.
Right.
So,
Right. You know, and I think that's an observation that causes us often to look inward, whether we feel alone or we feel troubled by what we see. And as important as the laws, some of which were passed here in this building, and there were black laws in Abraham Lincoln's time, you know, throughout the mid-19th century, that kept reducing the freedoms of free blacks living in Illinois. And that troubled many people. An outspoken critic, for example, was John Jones. And this is an individual living in Chicago who would come into this building and lobby legislators to repeal those black laws. And so what's interesting is that even after the passage of the 13th Amendment on February 1st of 1865, and so again, just so we're on the same page, can somebody tell me just really concisely what the 13th Amendment did? 13th Amendment ended what?
Slavery?
Slavery. But to your point, so on February 1st, the 13th Amendment was ratified by Illinois legislators upstairs in Representative Hall. But people living in Illinois could still say on February 2nd what you just said. I don't know if I see a difference. I don't know if I see a difference. Because on February 2nd, there were still laws on the books restricting the freedoms of free blacks living in Illinois. And so it took almost another week, which thank goodness isn't that long of a period of time. But the legislature had to come back about a week later and repeal those black laws. And in some ways, that change was more important than the ratification of the 13th Amendment. And so I think that comes down to that individual role again, where we might institute a program about bullying. There might be an anti-bullying campaign in a school, but maybe that's not enough. And so we've got to keep talking about it. We've got to keep working on it. And sometimes it's going to take us a lot longer than that extra week, right? But we know that people tried to repeal those black laws over decades and
Kept trying
and couldn't make it because there was too many obstacles. But they kept trying. And so when we look back at 1865 and we have that last part of January and the first part of February, that is one amazing week for what happened, because it begins with this repeal of begins with the ratification of the 13th Amendment and continues to the repeal of the black laws. And I think it oftentimes comes down to another kind of justice that isn't in the hands of judges and lawyers, but it's in our hands. Do you know what you call that brand of justice when you live it day in and day out? Has anybody heard of it? There's no law about it.
Choices.
And it's defined by our daily choices. You're right. We call that social justice. Social justice. Trying to do what's just day in and day out. And sometimes that brings about more change than any law possibly could.
Our progress in degeneracy appears to me to be pretty rapid. As a nation, we began by declaring that all men are created equal. We now practically read it, all men are created equal except Negroes.
Abraham Lincoln, 1855.
Hold on.